Man, I think I'm getting hot flashes. I never expected to read an article and actually feel some sense of support for a New York City landlord before. So this is a story that made the New York Post, and I've seen it copied and pasted, kind of, minor edits to many other platforms, and there was just something here that just didn't feel right to me. So I'm going to read it, and you guys let me know what you think. If anybody who's kind of interested in what my biases are, a cursory look at my channel should make it obvious that I am not somebody that is sympathetic to the cause of your average New York City commercial retail landlord, but there are some things that just don't seem to add up here. So it says, a beloved New York City chocolate shop's future is at risk amid a rent battle. Growing up in Poland, Camilla Meisel's parents always wanted to be a dentist, but the New York City transplant who arrived in the United States in 1980 with political asylum amid martial law in her country had other plans. In 1990, she opened her own chocolate shop, Meisel's Chocolate, on 55th Street, and has been selling homemade chocolate and specialty candies ever since. To be clear, this is a very expensive area of the city. I would argue that the 55th Street area is probably the most expensive part of the entire city, one of the most expensive parts of the entire city when it comes to either residential or commercial real estate. The closer you get to around 59th Street between like 5th and 7th Avenue, the closer you get to this little intersection where everything is beyond expensive, and most stores that you'll even see existing there exist as a loss leader. A lot of them are not even making money except for some of the small delis. I don't know how they do it. Some of the delis in this area are paying $50,000 a month, but it's a very expensive area with some of the highest foot traffic in the city. This is sweeter. How does life get any better than this? The 65-year-old Meisel told the Post from behind the counter of the 470-square-foot confectionery. I was living the American dream. But like so many small business owners, the pandemic threatened her livelihood. Due to sluggish sales, Meisel hasn't paid her $7,800 monthly rent since April 2020. Pause. Okay, so the store was shuttered for a total of 5 months during lockdown and has been trying to negotiate a new lease since that July when her old one expired. However, negotiations turned tumultuous, and Meisel said her landlord served her with eviction papers in late August, demanding $250,000 in back rent. Pause again. Okay, so A, you aren't allowed to open. That's completely understandable. If you did not pay your rent during the months that you were not allowed to open your business due to dictator de Blasio and Cuomo, I understand where you're coming from. If you paid zero because you weren't open, or you paid decrease because you were open and no one was showing up. Zero since April of 2020. Even if you did have a candy shop, for the last several months, you were able to be open. So if you are able to open, I'm not saying pay the whole $7,800 because this is 470 square feet. My old store was about 5,300 and it was 650 square feet, and my current store is 12,500 at 2,250 square feet. So she's paying more for this place than I am for my current store or my old store. So there is some sympathy there. Now, just for a little bit of math, my store that I have now is $66.66 a square foot. Unlucky number. The store that I used to have when I rented it was $69 a square foot, lucky number, and it was about $96 a square foot when I left. Her store at $7,800 a month would come out to $198 a square foot, which is insane. That is insane, but that is par for the course for 55th Street. On 55th Street, you will see things going for $200 to $500 a square foot. I personally think that's insanely unsustainable, but that's the rate. So just so you get an idea, she's paying more than 3 times what I am paying per square foot, and a big part of that is because she is in a prestigious area that has a lot of foot traffic on 55th Street. Zero since April of 2020. Zero? Even with my business. So again, I've said that I have about $80,000 or $90,000 in back rent debt. I've beaten that down to $70K. I didn't pay zero. I paid $4,000 to $6,000. When more people came in, I paid $6,000 to $8,000. When we had a good month, I paid $10,000. And then when we were allowed to have a class in the store or allow students in again, because that was a big reason that I moved, so that I could continue to do the classes that I was doing prior to the CBC News piece coming out, making it impossible for me to fit more people in the store, I just funneled all of the revenue that I got from classes directly to my landlord. So I had a class, 3 students. I just took all the revenue from that and gave it to my landlord. So for a few months, I gave them $15,000 or $20,000, and last month I gave them about $25K. But I didn't give zero. If you give zero, that sends a message that is going to cause lots of landlords, and I would understand this to say, okay, screw you. The second thing that doesn't add up here are the numbers. So it says demanding $250,000 in back rent. She has a monthly rent of $7,800. So let's say you have a monthly rent of $7,800 and they're asking for $250,000 in back rent. A little bit of cursory math would suggest that that's 32 months of unpaid rent. 32 months is almost 3 years, and the pandemic only started, the restrictions really started March of last year. So let's say March 20th was when Cuomo brought the hammer down with the pause order. I'll always remember that, a day that lives in infamy here. So March 20th, 2020. So that was, I should be able to do math on the fly quicker than this. That was 19 months ago, whereas the amount that they're asking for is 32 months of unpaid rent at a rate of $7,800. So that's kind of strange. There's something weird there. Again, even if you're making less money than you were before, let's just say that you only reopened in July of this year. You reopened in July of this year when everything was, kind of opening up again. A lot of the restrictions were being lifted. You were allowed to have people, indoor dining and stuff like that again. Now, again, this is a 470 square foot store. They're paying over $180 a square foot. I think it's insane. Again, that's what the going rent is on 55th Street, which is a very, very popular area, very, very touristy area, lots of foot traffic everywhere in that area because you're right near Broadway and everything else. But let's say that you're only able to pay something much less. Let's say that you're only able to pay half the rate that I'm being asked to pay for my current store right now. Even if that's the case, even if it was $33 a square foot, which would be an insane bargain for that area, even by my standards, you're looking at $1,292.50 a month. So that would, maybe $1,000 to $2,000 a month for a couple of months, or at least for the past 4 months when you were allowed to fully open. The idea that zero is being paid, I think, is the part that is incensing the landlord, understandably so. Because even with decreased business in the area, even with a lot of offices being closed and decreased tourism, a few $1,000s a month should be fairly simple to get from that location if you have anybody coming by at all. And if I were getting nothing, I'd probably be incensed as well. Zero is pushing it, and I kind of understand why the landlord in this case would be pissed off. It says, Mizell said her landlord, Solil Management, is being unreasonable. They broke me when they served me with court papers, she said. They doubled the rent, she added tearfully, of the initial $15,000 ask, noting she's one of the few businesses on West 55th Street and 5th and 6th Avenues that has survived the crisis. So she's bringing up something that really does make sense here, which is that every place else is empty. So if everything is empty, why are you doubling my rent? Why are you almost doubling it? Now, the question here is when they asked for the additional $15,000. So if we look at $250,000 in back rent requested, even at $15,000, that comes out to 16 months ago, which means that there's been virtually nothing paid since the very beginning of this. Now, again, it doesn't give a timeline. Did they ask for $15K starting now? Did they ask for $15K starting at the beginning of last year, the beginning of this year? I don't know. Now, she says it hasn't been easy. With the bustling business otherwise brought in by nearby office workers, hotels, and foot traffic, Mizell said there were days where receipts were depressingly low. For how many months I made $40 a day, $50 a day, I can't take it any longer. Is the greed and the money more important than the history of the city? Now, this really is an important point. So one of the ideas behind capitalism is that you'll be able to outbid somebody on a space if you're able to use it more efficiently and then get access to that space. So, for instance, let's say somebody does VCR repair and they're having trouble paying their rent and their landlord is looking to get rid of them. And I come by as a successful MacBook component level data recovery logic board repair shop that is performing repairs that are a little bit more relevant in 2021 than VCR repair. I am going to make more efficient use of that space. I'm going to do more things that people need out of that space than the VCR repairman, so I will get that space from the VCR repairman. That is the way that capitalism is supposed to work. The way what we have going on in New York City in reality is the prices are so high that nobody can make use of the space at all, regardless of how efficient they are, so it just stays empty forever. The spaces in New York City, it's not like, for instance, when I moved into my old shop, there was a linoleum store there, and that guy was clearly salty that I took it. I remember he came by one time and he said, this landlord kicked me out, he's asking such an insane amount of money, there's no way anybody in hell would ever be able to pay this, and I was able to pay it, even though I'm kind of a failure as a business person. I suck as a business person. I'm not good at running a business. I haven't run my business as well as I could have. I didn't start it with a lot of money, and even I was able to pay for that old space because I was doing something relevant, which was component level electronics repair, and he was selling linoleum in 2012. Linoleum is just not something people use a lot. Again, my grandma's house was filled with linoleum everywhere. I haven't seen linoleum in a long time because nobody uses it. Now, If you're making $40 to $50 a day, that's going to come out to like what? Again, if you're making 40 to 50 bucks a day, I can understand why the landlord would look at this and say, you've given us $0 over the past year and you make $40 to $50 a day. I don't see how you're ever going to be able to pay rent here. Again, if you're making 40 bucks a day, even if you're not paying yourself, let's assume you're not paying yourself for any expenses, that's $1,200 a month. Somebody else is going to be able to make use of real estate on 55th Street in one of the most popular areas of the city. There's somebody out there that's going to be able to outbid you on that space who's going to be able to actually do something with it. Now, I'm not defending the fact that there are places in the city that stay empty for years and years on end because they want $600 a square foot, and God forbid they actually go down to $500 or $400 or, I don't know, something more reasonable like $20 to $40, which people could actually afford. But what do you, like, is the greed and money more important than the history of the city? At some, like, there's respecting history, and then there's a VCR repair shop whose time has just fucking come, or a linoleum shop whose time has just come. There is preserving history. It is important to preserve history. At the same time, I don't think that means that if a business is only capable of bringing in $40 to $50 a day, that business needs to exist in one of the most popular areas of New York City at ground level retail. I feel bad if the business is not able to bring in what it used to, and I'm sure that this place sells fine chocolate. I'm sure that they do very hard work and do a great job. But if you've paid zero, like literally zero in a year and a half, what is a landlord supposed to do at that point? And my landlord probably doesn't like me. My building's a co-op, and I wouldn't be surprised if the people that live in this building don't like me very much. You know, my rent is $12,500, and there are many months where I give them $4,000 or $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000. And recently, I've given them $20,000 to $25,000, but that's not something that's going to be sustainable, given that again, we only got classes because there was pent up demand for it, and that's kind of went away. They probably don't like me very much. And I do have $70K in back rent debt. However, if I was to not pay any rent for the entirety of this time, my back rent debt wouldn't be $70,000. It would be something closer to $240,000. I owe $70K, not $240K, because I was doing what I thought was reasonable, which is paying what made sense at the time based on the walk-in business that existed. If I paid nothing, then if I had given my landlord zero, like instead of giving them over $140,000 over the past year and a half, I just gave them like literally zero, I really wouldn't have a leg to stand on with them being so angry that they want me to just GTFO entirely. Meitzel's lawyer, Joshua Wurtzel, whose firm, Schlam, Stone, and Dolan, is working on the case pro bono, told the Post that while the landlord has come down from the initial offer, the warring parties have yet to reach an agreement. At a certain point, she just doesn't have money and can't afford it, said Wurtzel. If she doesn't pay, they'll be able to evict her. Which, again, if you've paid zero, like actual zero, from April 2020 to now, I think that that's reasonable. I think that that's reasonable. I don't like New York City commercial realtors. I don't like most New York City commercial landlords. But zero. A representative from Solo Management told the Post, "We have been negotiating with her and trying to come up with something fair. We have not received any rent since April 2020. I'm just surprised nothing gets paid for us and she's open for business," said the rep, adding, "We're still looking to make a deal if we can." Meanwhile, fans of the beloved chocolate shop around the corner have stepped in to help Meisel. Councilman Keith Powers, who represents the store's district, along with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, wrote a letter to Solo Management on October 4th asking the company to, quote, "negotiate in good faith a fair and equitable lease and stop the lawsuit against Camilla. This will allow her to continue to run one of the few immigrant, women-owned businesses in all of New York City and provide for her family." Instagram influencer Nicholas Heller, better known as New York Nico, is also using his platform to help Meisel. "This place is effing incredible, and I want you all to experience it and support Camilla," he wrote in a lengthy post garnering over 21,000 likes. A GoFundMe page was set up to help offset Meisel's back rent, so far raising $7,000. I'll link to it down below. It's up to $7,200 of $99K. Customers are weighing in on the fight, too. "I'm incensed," said Wendy Handler, who just moved to New York and has quickly become a regular. "It's like David and Goliath." Also, this was to help offset Meisel's back rent. If the back rent that they're asking for is $250,000, the GoFundMe is $99K, which is somewhat confusing. So this would make sense if the back rent was $7,800 and she had paid none for about the period of the pandemic, whereas $250K doesn't really make sense. I'm very curious here where these numbers are coming from and why they are there. Sweet shopper Betsy Polovi told the Post, "We must help this lovely woman who came here from Poland speaking no English. She is beloved by so many. This is who New York is." And I agree. People that come here from other countries where they're getting crapped on, who come here and start a business from nothing, this is what New York City is. If you're willing to grind and work your 12 to 14 hours a day, you could start something from nothing, be successful. It's part of what makes New York City amazing. People from all around the world, different cultures, different thought processes, different philosophies, different religious beliefs, coming together, working their balls off to create something from nothing and being successful. That's cool. There's something we're missing here. There's a part of the story that I think we're missing here. Mizell, who said she is humbled by all the support, said the shop is who she is too. You see someone walk in and they get this big smile on their face, she said, of selling treats to her customers. They turn into children. Now, again, I get the idea of preserving the city's history, but if we're going to say that a store that is bringing in $40 to $50 a day needs to be preserved in one of the most popular sections of the city, where do you stop with that? Again, we're at the other end. We're at the other end of the dystopian nightmare right now. To be clear, I'm on the side of anybody who says that New York City real estate is absolutely insane, it's out of control, and that something needs to happen. This bubble needs to burst because it's unsustainable and ridiculous. I have a playlist on my channel here called Dead City Neighborhood Walkthroughs, and on this playlist over here, I just walk through a bunch of different areas in New York City, and I show you that you have blocks where the entire block has no store there. That's because they're asking $500 to $600 per square foot for places that are completely unsustainable. But the other end of that would be a business that is not viable, even if the rent were lower, that is bringing in virtually no money, being present in one of the most popular areas of the city. Are we going to preserve the VCR repair shops? Are we going to preserve the beeper repair shops? Like, if VCR and beeper repair shops that were historic to the city wind up getting replaced with data recovery shops, component level board repair places and stuff like that, does that mean that we're neglecting our history? Should places that are able to bring in $0 to $50 a day continue to exist if they have no capability of paying anything? And again, is the landlord here asking for $250K because they're being unreasonable and adding on some BS, 18% or 100% interest charges to the rent that's not paid? Or is this a business that was suffering even prior to the pandemic that really wasn't viable at all? I think that there needs to be more details when giving stories like this before defaulting to max outrage at the landlord. I really never thought I'd be doing a video in support of a New York City commercial retail landlord, but given the details in this article, it is really just not enough to be able to universally condemn the landlord. Obviously, them doubling the rent from $7,800 to $15,000, like that, yes, bullshit. Again, this is what happened to my old boss in 2008. He was paying about $17,000 or $18,000 a month to have half the floor in the Film Center building, and they just came up to him at the end of his 15-year lease and said, "Hey, how's it going? How's it going?" So, you usually go up like a few percent each year. Yeah, instead of being about 17.5, we're going to be asking about 39,000 this year. Yeah, about that. And the floor emptied out, and it wasn't rented, and nobody rented it, and it's still empty today because that's New York City. I'm not defending that part. What I'm saying is that if a landlord has gotten $0 from a tenant over a year and a half, when they are now allowed to open, I would understand why they're pissed. I would understand why they're mad. I'm not saying that little shithole of a space is worth $15,000. $380 a square foot, they're out of their fucking mind. But the tenant who's paying $0 over a year and a half, I don't think that's really reasonable. I don't think that's any better either. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.